It's the 11th day of August. Hello and welcome to Moneyweb at midday. My name is Duduzile Ramela in for Jeremy Maggs this afternoon. In the next 30 minutes, we'll put context around the numbers, perspective around the politics, and clarity around the choices facing us in South Africa. Here's what's on the menu. Economist Davi Ruert will help answer the question of whether South Africa is nearing a tax revolt. Renewable energy is set to become the country's infrastructure success story. We find out how shortly. We look at a new digital location system that is set to transform access to services. A focus on mental health in the age of digital disruptions, and we tell you why women are reshaping the used car market. Benjamin Franklin is said to have coined the phrase, "Nothing is certain but death and taxes." On the latter, there's an argument being made that South Africa is facing a tax revolt. So in the 2023 tax year, around 7.6 million individuals filed tax returns, with only 1.6 million earning more than 500,000 annually, and that contributed some 76% to all personal income tax. With an economy growing on average 1% each year, high unemployment and skilled immigration, South Africa's remaining tax base is under pressure. Chief Economist at Efficient Group, Davi Ruert, joins us for more. Davi, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Maybe let's start with an introduction, if not a reminder, of South Africa's fiscal landscape. How would you describe it?
Hello, very nice talking to you. Well, if you look at the budget, when you talk about fiscal policy, you usually refer to the budget. And the budget consists of all sort of things. Like, for example, the revenue side, the various taxes, and where the main tax revenue comes from. Like, for example, personal income tax is the most important revenue source to the Minister of Finance. And you mentioned some numbers there. There are, of course, value-added taxes, a very important tax as well, company taxes, and a number of other taxes, like the fuel levy and the sin taxes and so on. So that's the revenue side of the budget. And of course, there are some people that pay much more than other people on the revenue side, and we can talk about that just now. On the expenditure side, the money goes somewhere, and it typically goes to things like, for example, education, the biggest expenditure item, but also to interest and the various grants and that sort of stuff. So money goes somewhere. And then the third aspect of a budget that is certainly important is the money that the politicians borrow on our behalf. It's called the fiscal deficit, and the Minister of Finance has been borrowing a lot of money on our behalf. And in the process, what has happened, the state debt levels has reached very dangerously high levels. So that's roughly where we are. I can tell you is that the tax burden is very heavy on a very, very narrow tax base in South Africa. Put differently, few pay a lot of taxes, while the money goes to a large number of people, and there are something like 30 million people out of a population of 65 million people that they receive an income from the state every month. And then the third thing, the tax or the debt levels have reached really very high levels, something that we all need to be very, very concerned about. And what has been happening recently is that the Minister of Finance, he needs to spend a lot of money because there are so many people that are depending on the state for an income. And the Minister of Finance has been giving more and more money to SARS, and SARS is squeezing every last drop of blood out of the economy because the economy is not growing fast enough to fund the state as well. So that roughly is where we are at the moment on fiscal policy.
Right. So you said there are those who pay more than others, and we can go into that. So when we look at the country's tax burden, what is our tax to GDP ratio, and what does it tell us about the tax burden and trying to understand it?
Okay, tax to GDP ratio, that's actually quite a difficult question, and let me tell you why. Because the expenditures percent, and maybe let me just interrupt myself for a moment. When we talk about taxes and when we talk about state expenditure, I'm referring here specifically to the national accounts. That's what the Minister of Finance is responsible for. There are many other authorities as well, the local authorities or the state-owned enterprises or the provinces, or even things like, for example, the road accident fund. They're all part of the state, if you like, but let's just concentrate on the national accounts. Now, state expenditure as a percentage of GDP is approximately 32% as a percentage of GDP, while state revenue or tax burden is just below 30%, 29%. And the difference between the two is a so-called fiscal deficit, and that's what the Minister of Finance borrows. But remember, the deficit, the money that he borrows, we have to repay that. So the deficit is nothing but postponed taxes. And the day will come that we actually need to pay off that debt. So the right way of trying to answer your question, what is the revenue as a percentage of GDP, that is actually equal to the expenditure to GDP, because expenditure consists of, revenue plus the deficit, which are both actually part of the tax burden. So the answer to that is more than approximately a third of the total economy is spent on state expenditure or then on taxes.
Speaking at the Kragdag conference, you made the assertion that a tax revolt is already underway in the country. What is it that you're seeing with your client base that suggests this?
Just for interest, the first tax revolt that I'm aware of in South Africa happened in the 1800s in the then Natal, when especially the Zulus revolted against a poll tax. A poll tax is where you pay a fixed amount of money. Everybody pays exactly the same amount of money. But what we've seen in South Africa, the tax burden has been going up, creeping up. The total state expenditure today is approximately double where it was in 1970. So the state has been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's the nature of all of us. We all want the state to spend money on me, but I don't want to pay the taxes. And that is, I guess, the biggest flaw of a democracy. If we all vote for politicians that will spend money on me, but we don't want to vote for politicians that are going to take taxes away from me. But what I have seen, and I think this is not only an emotional reaction, but there's a lot of actual economics behind this as well. People are really getting quite aggressive when it comes to tax planning. We know what happened to the toll roads. That's a very good example, where people simply stop paying the tolls. That is, in a way, a tax revolt. I know when people come into my office what they tell me about taxes and what they think about taxes. One should have sympathy for this, because the tax burden as it is very unfair. And we can talk about that if you want to. But not only is it very unfair, people are very unhappy with the way money is being spent. We know about all this corruption and about all these commissions and so on, and how the money is spent. And people don't like that. People quite often tell me, but listen, I'm happy to pay taxes, but the money must be well spent. I can also tell you, objectively seen, South Africa's tax burden is higher than similar countries in the world. But compared to, say, the advanced countries like the rich world, South Africa's tax burden is actually on the low side. But there are some other factors as well. South Africa is inequality is much higher in South Africa than, for example, in European countries, and the redistribution effect of the fiscus in European countries is much lower than in South Africa. Let me just tell you what I mean by redistribution effect, and that is that I mentioned that the guys paying the taxes are not the guys receiving the benefits of those taxes mostly. And that means that the state takes money from the rich and gives to the poor, in simple terms. And the redistribution effect of the state in South Africa, and I've done the calculations, is probably the highest in the world. Not necessarily that is wrong. There are many reasons for that, but I'm just saying that the guys paying the taxes are not the guys getting the benefits, and the benefits are not always that well spent either. So yes, without a doubt, people are very unhappy about the tax burden.
I think for some time now, South Africa has been talking about, or the president of South Africa, even before the GNU, a social contract, because to your point, people don't mind paying taxes as long as they see where their monies are going. Unfortunately, that's all the time we can afford this afternoon. We do know that you're driving, Davi. Thank you very much and safe travels for joining us here on Moneyweb at midday. Davi Root is Chief Economist at Efficient Group.
Think SARS isn't watching? Well, think again. Join Moneyweb editor Ryk van Niekerk in conversation with South African Revenue Services Commissioner Dr. Ngubani Johnson Makubu at the Money Summit. Together, they'll unpack how SARS has transformed tax collection through AI-powered audits, third-party data matching, and tougher compliance measures. Find out what every taxpayer and business needs to know. Tuesday, the 1st of September at the Sandton Convention Centre. Register for free using the promo code MONEYWEB. Visit moneyweb.co.za and secure your seat today.
Moneyweb at midday, for all your up-to-date stories.
The Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Procurement Program, South Africa's flagship competitive bidding program for procuring electricity from private sector renewable energy projects, is progressing. A lot of P's there. This year is said to be the biggest yet for private power investment. Danny Moller is Chief Engineering, Procurement and Construction Officer at Molilo. He contends that the renewable energy sector in South Africa is becoming a case study for construction excellence. He joins us to tell us why. Danny, thank you for your time. Perhaps we can start there. What are you seeing to support this?
Thank you, Dylan, for the opportunity, and good night to you and the listeners. Yes, what we're seeing in the industry is currently we've got over 5 gigawatts of financial closures that's planned for 2026 this year, and that equates to somewhere between 90 billion and 110 billion rands worth of projects that we will see going into construction. That is quite a significant amount of investment that people are investing from a private point of view.
Mm-hmm. Is this capital being deployed?
Yes, that's capital definitely being deployed. And we're seeing that some of this construction is getting to closure from a construction point of view as well. And a nice example is on our Du Plessis Dam project in Daar. We've just finished the mechanical installation. That is somewhere around 170,000 photometallic modules that we've packed in a very short period of time, using local labor and procuring obviously from international suppliers. But all of the work was done locally, mostly by people also from Daar.
That's very encouraging. So boosting employment in the Northern Cape. What of transmission, right? So when we speak of the Castel main transmission substation, still in the Northern Cape, what did you see where transmission is concerned?
Yes, we all know, I think by now, that the transmission network is one of the big constraints that we're seeing in the country currently for us deploying these new projects. So as part of 4 different projects, we built a main transmission station, an MTS, for Eskom, which will be handed over to Eskom as soon as the recommissioning is completed. So we've actually done the commissioning, the energization of the 500 MVA transformer just recently. That project will, for the 4 projects that's connected to it, will supply just over 500 megawatts of renewable energy into the transmission system. So that project was built in 18 months, and it's been successfully commissioned, as I said, just recently.
What sort of technologies have you deployed? Is it solar? Is it wind? Is it battery?
On the specific MTS, what we are connecting to it is 3 photovoltaic PV plants, so it's solar, and 1 wind farm.
Okay. We can't imagine that delivering a project of this magnitude or projects of this magnitude goes without any obstacles. Maybe you can talk to us, because you've spoken about these labor part of it, right? So you've had people from the Northern Cape actually doing the work. But in terms of skills, did you have to maybe bring in labor from other parts of the world, rather? And also in terms of your supply chains, we see what is happening with disruptions maybe to the Strait of Hormuz. I wonder if that has had any impact at all on operations.
Yeah, any projects will go with some problems. It's just a given. It's anything you do, there will be something that goes wrong. So the best thing is to plan for those things. Make sure you monitor progress and any of your risks. So we didn't use a lot of foreign labor on these plants. It was mainly the local South African labor, and then the bulk of it came from the local to town or local to project area. So the supply, we cannot compete currently with, for instance, the Chinese market when it comes to the manufacturing cost of the modules and the panels for the PV plant, as well as the wind turbines. Even Europe is currently struggling to compete with the Chinese market on even quality, not just price. So a lot of the equipment we do import. We did see some cost increases due to the war with Iran, and America increased the fuel pricing, and that had an effect on our projects, which we had to manage. But otherwise, most of the risk are things like rain. On the project, we had a lot of rain last year, which we had to control and work around with. The local community, a lot of people do criticize the communities for closing the sites. If that is managed properly, because you do understand that they are looking for work, and it's a critical thing for someone that's hungry and needs to feed a family, that is quite important. So for us, it's something that we do manage upfront, working with the local community, understanding their needs, and then trying to support where we can.
Danny, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Danny Moller is Chief Engineering, Procurement and Construction Officer at Umlilo.
You're listening to Moneyweb at Midday.
Finding an address sounds simple until different maps, databases and government systems all speak different languages. Now, South Africa's national standards for spatial information have been gazetted, the legislation that established the South African spatial data infrastructure. Marna Ruas is Senior Client Consultant at AfriGIS. They believe the new act, done right, can add a percentage point to the country's GDP over time. She joins us now to tell us how, I guess, essentially, Marna. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. You believe this new legislation could be a game changer, more so economically. What is the current spatial information landscape, and what is it that this proposed legislation intends to do? What is different?
I think the difference, thank you so much for having me first of all. I think what's different, and the difference that this will make, is standards is not new to South Africa. We've always had a very strong geospatial standards presence nationally and internationally, and this was the first time that it was gazetted. The addressing standard was published in 2009, the metadata standard in 2011. So it's all mature models that are now being gazetted so that all organs of state and public and private sector can all reap the benefits. If we all use the same blueprint, everything moves forward, because then it's interoperable. The best way to describe it is, if you look at it from a business perspective, everything you see in a spreadsheet relates to something on the earth, because all business, all economic activities, or the majority of it, has a spatial founding. If you have to start a business and you can have access to accurate information, accurate and current information, to allow you to find the best place or the best location to open a business, to see what the gaps are, everything can just move forward. What we saw happening in South Africa, across different municipalities, everyone captured data from a different perspective. Nobody thought they were doing it wrong. And now we have a blueprint. We can say that these are the fields that are required. These are the matters of importance. You need to know from a point of capture that it's accurate, who it was captured by, and what the date was, so that when you use the data later on, you can say, no, I can't use this. This is 10 years old. This is 15 years old. Or this was not captured to an accuracy that's relevant. Mm-hmm. So that's the difference that it makes. It will not mean that we all will get new addresses. It will just mean that the address format that we use, because we have such a varied landscape. South Africa, with all our languages and all our different cultures, we don't have the street name, street number. We don't have that across the board. That's why we have different address classes, to enable all of those to be relevant and all of those to be seen. So now, from a risk perspective, you can see that. And then when we do a risk model, we can say that these areas are more rurally based. They have site addresses, which is only an earth number, and a sub-locality name, which is almost like a town name. And it enables all these things to have relevance, to be captured and to be economically viable.
Okay. So you mentioned that we will not be needing new addresses. If I can just confirm that.
That will create chaos.
Okay,
yes,
great.
Yes, you can confirm that. That will create chaos.
Which industries stand to benefit then the most from this change, Marna?
All industries. Okay. It's very interesting when I thought of this, since it's been gazetted. The first private company to ever ask about the addressing standard was an emergency response company. Because in emergency response, they need to know that the address that they are responding to is completely and 100% accurate, because it could mean the difference between life and death.
Fair
If
enough.
you look at it from a fraud perspective, from a financial perspective, we all know FICA, but that can be, who's to say that the address that you supply is still current or still relevant? And now we have, if we're all singing from the same hymn book, then we can say this address is not current, that this was updated or this changed, and we can create a better profile.
Okay. Now, I was interested by that move of adding at least 1 percentage point to our GDP. How do we do this? Because you say getting the foundation right is important. How do we get the foundation right to get to that uptick in GDP?
We do that by all having the same information available. At the moment, quality geospatial information is only available to the large organizations. Now we can make that available to small business enterprise. We can say that before you open your restaurant, see what the best place will be, what the competitor analysis will be. You can make sure that the metadata, that the trust that you have in your spatial surroundings and how your business will interact with the world around it is optimal for what you want to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That makes sense. Thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon. Marna Ruas is Senior Client Consultant at Afrigis. Thank you so much, Marna. We really appreciate your time.
You're very welcome.
Moneyweb at midday for all your up-to-date stories.
It's safe to say that the global labor market is undergoing some serious changes. Automation is disrupting industries as there is a widely held belief that it will increase productivity. And the risk of people losing their jobs instead of being incorporated into AI-driven solutions has many fearing for their livelihoods and seeking ways to prove their value. We look at the mental health aspect of human performance now, as well as the science behind high performance if you are looking to get that edge. Richard Sutton is a human performance specialist, and he joins us now for this conversation. Thank you very much, Richard, for your time this afternoon. When we take a look at where we are in the world, people want to set themselves apart. What separates high performers from the rest?
I think more than anything, it's mindset. It's the belief that we have the potential to rise above and beyond circumstance.
The mind is a very interesting place to be. And so you look at your environment and you look at where you want to go. How do you self-regulate when you look at the emotions that come with it, right? So whether it's fear, whether it's anxiety, that is also mixed with wanting the best for yourself.
So, it's interesting. Earlier, you talked about unemployment, and there was a large meta-analysis, huge collaboration between Stanford and Harvard universities, looking at around 228 high-quality studies and the implications of unemployment and insecurity in that space and how it impacts mental and emotional well-being. And what they uncovered was that the impact is absolutely astronomical. It increases the odds of developing depression or anxiety, or even dying from all causes prematurely. Significantly, the depression anxiety piece was a 90% higher risk, and all-cause mortality was 40% higher risk. So it does raise the bar in terms of our emotional dysregulation. Now, the thing about emotional dysregulation is so much is driven by uncertainty. Human beings have a very limited tolerance to uncertainty. In fact, a third of us have a medical condition called intolerance to uncertainty, where it does trigger these very negative emotions and negative states. So uncertainty, and I think that's, if there's a known future that we're moving towards, I think we can all prepare. But the fact that the future is less certain and less known gives us this sense of disease, and that in itself is creating the state of hypervigilance. So there's this always on, and how do we be more relevant, and how do we be more capable, and how do we set ourselves up in the future and be effective and not be redundant and not have to kind of reimagine our lives on the back foot, so to speak. And that's triggering the survival axis, and the survival axis is the stress axis. And certainly a dysregulated stress axis then becomes a catalyst to a variety of emotional experiences and physical outcomes.
where do I go? How do I start? So like practically, how do I then bring myself back towards myself? Are there certain things that I can do on a daily basis that can just help me? So I think maybe just talk to somebody who's really feeling what you are describing, but also wants some answers to the questions that you have posed there at the end. How then do I become more relevant?
I think there's a few steps here. And the first step is to understand that change is inevitable. And human beings have this relationship with a love-hate relationship with change. In some respects, we love it and it excites us. In other respects, it's all-consuming and debilitating. The difference or the distinction between what change that is positive and stimulating is change that is on our terms. When change is imposed, it becomes really stress-provoking and overwhelming in all respects. So I think the first step that we need to kind of take is an acknowledgement. The current set of circumstances are demanding that we change, we evolve, we look at things through a different context, a different light. The second piece is we can't change without being regulated, to your point, is how do we regulate ourselves and how do we create an environment where it's safe enough to explore the unknown and to make mistakes and to try new things and to be more curious about our lives and everything in it. So this regulation piece now becomes the stepping stone, and breath work and meditation all become huge levers in this arc.
So I also hear you talking about all the stress manifesting onto your body and how to manage that when you speak of breath work, when you speak of meditation, because in this busy time or in this stressful time, sometimes you can neglect to take care of yourself physically, right? So you grab the nearest thing to you. It might not necessarily be the best thing for your body. How important is it that you also look after your body by eating the right things when you speak of things, or rather when you just building on to your point of breath work, of meditation?
I think, there's not, at this point in time, the issue is not stress. It's about regulating the stress. And stress, there's a good and bad component. Stress that is protracted, not so good. Stress that is short-lived can be very invigorating and very stimulating and exciting and moving and helps us overcome hurdles and barriers. It's quite an incredible axis. So now we're looking at how do we regulate better? Well, there's four pieces here. One is the ability to calm ourselves down through supplements and the natural environments and calming music. The other is looking after our physical health and well-being. Stress adds load to the system. So we have to compensate or certainly manage that increased load by being more selective on our diet and exercising a bit more frequently and getting some sunlight. We also have to understand that we can't deal with this alone. We have to reach out for support. We have to connect to others. And kind of through this, we develop a certain degree of agency and certainly, stress becomes, and the challenge that we're facing now becomes a vehicle to ultimately a better expression of self.
Very interesting. Unfortunately, that's all the time we can afford for now. Human performance specialist Richard Sutton, thank you very much for your contribution.
You're listening to Moneyweb at Midday.
Women are buying more cars than ever before, now accounting for almost 4 in 10 financed vehicle purchases in South Africa. But they're not just changing what they buy, they're changing how they expect to buy. Is the automotive industry keeping up with the demands for greater transparency, trust, and a better customer experience? Well, to help us answer that question, we're joined by Wheelie's Head of Marketing, Sam Ghislane. Sam, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. So with women now accounting for almost 40% of financed car purchases, what's driving the shift?
Hi, Duduzile. Thank you so much for having me. There are a few things happening at the same time. The first is that women's economic participation and purchasing power have grown significantly in our country in the last decade. So women are increasingly making major financial decisions themselves, including vehicle purchases. And secondly, I think what we're seeing is a change in how people buy cars. Yes, women are doing more research, before they ever walk into a dealership. They are comparing pricing, looking at running costs, researching reliability and safety, and using digital channels to narrow down their options. But I believe that the growth to 39% is a sign that the automotive customer is changing by becoming more informed, more digital, and more deliberate about how they want to spend their money.
Very interesting. We love it for them. So are women looking for different cars or simply a different car buying experience?
I'd say it's both, but the bigger opportunity is the experience. There are certainly differences in the types of vehicles women are choosing. SUVs and crossovers are particularly popular, and we are seeing strong consideration around, again, safety, reliability, the practicality of the vehicle, and the total cost of ownership. But I don't think we should fall into the trap of comparing or stereotyping vehicles based on gender. What we're really seeing is that women are often very deliberate buyers. They want to understand what they're buying, what that cost will be to own a car, and whether the vehicle is going to work for their lifestyle as well as the full car buying process. What people are, or women are asking for, is what every good customer should be asking for, and that is clarity, value, and confidence.
Fair enough, and you're completely right. Looking at the experience for everybody across the board, your research suggests, though, that women value, like you said, trust and transparency over hard selling. Are we seeing the industry shift, or are outdated sales approaches still being used?
It's a great question. I think the industry is definitely evolving, but there's still a gap between how consumers want to buy and how cars have traditionally been sold. Historically, the dealership experience should be quite sales-led, or it has been quite sales-led in getting the customer across the line. However, customers today have already done a huge amount of research before they even engage with a specific dealership or a salesperson. I believe that the role of the salesperson and the role of marketing also has changed. It's also less about controlling the information at hand and more about helping customers make that confident decision through trust, again, through vehicle transparency and a high-touch experience from that first touch point, that first phone call, and inviting the customer to actually test drive the car, all through the way educating them about the car buying process. I believe that you can't outsell an informed customer, but you have to earn their trust.
And that's just it. I'd like to expand on that point, because with people doing their own research, what's that one thing that dealerships need to change to attract, or rather win over more female buyers?
I don't think it's about selling more or harder. It's about removing that friction. To make it easier for customers to understand the car, the price and the condition, and the finance options available, and ultimately what they're committing to. Don't make the customers work to get the basic information. Make it easier for them to access that information. If I'm a customer and I've researched a vehicle online, I shouldn't have to walk into any dealership and start the process from zero. I'm coming in already with a specific informed decision in mind. The best dealerships will meet actually the customers where they are. They will give them the information they're looking for and then add that value through the human experience and expertise.
Fair enough. Thank you so much, Sam, for your time this afternoon. Sam Ghislane is Head of Marketing at Wheelie.
Moneyweb at midday, for all your up-to-date stories.
You've been listening to Moneyweb at midday. We're here every weekday at noon with the latest in current affairs, the economy and policy. You can always catch the podcast version a little later. Thank you very much for making us part of your day. My name is Duduzi Leramela. Jeremy Maggs is back with you tomorrow. Until next time, bye-bye.